What's going on, everybody? Brett here, back with some more Total War Warhammer 2. This is going to be another 2v2, and you're of course watching this on my YouTube channel, Good Talk Gaming. Alright, all that YouTube stuff out of the way. This is a fun one. I had a ton of fun. We played a couple games together, me and the same gentleman, and maybe a few different gentlemen actually joined, but I think some stayed. I was playing the Lizardmen, my ally is going to be the Empire, and we're up against Bordello for the Bretonnians and the Dark Elves. So let's see how this goes. It's a 2v2. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on. This is a pretty wild Lizardmen themed map. There's lots of terrain to consider. There are patches of forest that block lines of sight. There are random kind of hills interspersed about. Even some of these, impenetrable objects that you can't shoot artillery through. So, alright, where to begin? Alright, let's start with my vanguarded units. I think that's a pretty good place to start. Pop up this unit tab. So I have three groups of the chameleon skinks, these little buggers here with their missile resistance, their poison dart damage, their 360 fire while moving. Great scouting unit. Put them up on this other side of the hill. As soon as they pop up, they'll give us vision of pretty much the entire army here. And also with the help of the pterodon riders, these are the standard ones. They have poison missile damage. They're decent if they have to go into melee. You can use them as kind of a rear charging, morale breaking unit. They can drop rocks, usually is not very relevant, but they do serve a pretty versatile purpose here on the battlefield. We're going to see if I can't make use of them. I'm trying to get into range here to start doing some poking damage, but what's going to come into play very quickly, and this is something I didn't see until almost the last minute because I really didn't expect it. Royal Pegasus Knights with standard Pegasus Knights. The difference being that the Royal Pegasus Knights are basically like Grail Knights. Man, if we could hover over them. They have a static 20% physical resistance, as well as having perfect vigor. And they're going to be joined by a paladin. Two paladins, actually, up on the Pegasus. And they are anti-large specialists, very quick on those mounts. And they're going to be able to goon just about anything on the battlefield that they so desire. And they're going to be headed straight for my skirmishers. And we're going to see if I can't kite them a bit, try and keep my units alive. With a speed of 95 versus my speed of 90, they'll be able to catch me. And I have to rely pretty heavily on my poison to slow them down and to keep them away from me. Out in this group of trees here, I have some Feral Cold Ones. I think I only have one unit of Feral... No, I have two units of Feral Cold Ones, but they're being kind of shepherded by this Saurus Scar Vet on a Cold One as well. And he's here basically for his armor piercing and his leadership boost. I took the Plaque of Dominion. It's not something I take very often on him, but it's going to come into pretty good effect here because I notice as soon as the battle starts that there are Dark Riders in either corner. And I'm going to send my guys over here into the corner to try and deal with them. They're standard Dark Riders. They're not very strong. Their stats are pretty pitiful. Two groups of Feral Cold Ones should be able to just completely envelop them. And with the help of the Saurus Scar Vet, I'm going to pop that Plaque of Dominion. And it's going to send their leadership just spiraling, and they're going to run off the battlefield. It's going to be a pretty nice early catch for us, for the Lizard Boys. My entire front line, this battle is going to be made up of these skink cohorts with javelins. I love these dudes. They're only 400 gold. They're very versatile. They're a good kind of tar pit unit. They can do damage, and if you need that poison missile damage, you have it. Any type of air threats that may end up sticking around. The thing about the skinks is they keep coming back. They die in huge numbers, and then as long as you continue to rally them, they're kind of similar to goblins in that way. You just keep rallying them back to the battlefield, and they'll generate value over the course of a long and grindy battle. So I think I have 6 groups of them, somewhat staggered to prevent any type of Wind of Death style shenanigans from the other side of the battlefield. And I also decided to take 2 Bastiladons with solar engines. Got them perched on the edge of this cliff here, ready to shoot some hot laser beams into the enemy. They are a pretty versatile unit as well, as all of the artillery are for the Lizardmen, because at the end of the day, they're still giant beasts. And thanks to this kind of clump of trees, let's see if this laser actually makes it all the way to these Pegasus. It's going, it's going. Oh, and it nails him. Okay, so they're taking some of that missile damage from my chameleon skinks. I'm hurrying up and getting my pterodon riders out of there, and I'm trying to split them up. At first I had them on skirmish mode, but then I ended up having to switch them to manual because sometimes skirmish mode freaks out a little bit and runs them into terrible directions. But So I'm going to have to be manually microing this while I'm, microing my artillery to take the best shots I can. And I'm also using my stegadons here. These are the basic stegadons. You see here they have like a ballista on their backs and little skinks ready to throw poison javelins. But at the end of the day, like I said, these are giant dinosaurs with 120 armor, and they'll be some of the last things standing on the battlefield for sure in any battle. I took one group of Temple Guard here to try and guard our flanks. I like to keep one group near Mazdamundi, just in case, but in this battle I think I'm going to have to throw them in as a means of trying to block up some of what our opponents are doing. They have an overwhelming number of units that are going to be able to get into our back lines pretty easily, should they so desire. And then, is that just about it for me? I think so. My last and most important probably piece on this battle, I'm going to go ahead and pause it so we can take a look at him, because I took a lot of things on him, and I think he's important to break down, because your choices when you choose Mazdamundi in terms of his spells and abilities are pretty key, and I'm going to tell you what I like to do whenever I take him. So, of course, I put him on Zlok, 140 armor, over 10,000 HP, near unbreakable leadership. He's pretty fast, 50 speed, not bad. Melee attacks, not that important. He hits so many unit models whenever he attacks, it's kind of unbelievable. Good melee defense, weapon strength, of course. He has that little bit of missile damage from the skinks riding next to him, who, very easy to miss. They're pretty cool. Actually, I don't think I've really taken a look at these dudes. Check them out. They're just kind of like cruising with Mazdamundi on his palanquin. But here are some of the big things that you need to know when you take Mazdamundi. He has the Greater Arcane Conduit, so this really helps him regen his Winds of Magic. I like to take the Sunburst Standard of Hexoatl. So what this gives me is 12% missile resistance as well as 9 melee defense. So the melee defense is of course relevant. It affects allies in range. So what I like to do is I take these two stegadons here and I'll park Mazdamundi next to them and next to any other valuable targets that I have that may be vulnerable to missile fire. And that extra 12% missile resistance combined with his already 15% missile resistance makes him a bit harder of a target to snipe. Plus, 140 armor as well. And then Cold-Blooded, of course, he comes with. And Apotheosis. This is the one spell that I take. This is the only spell that I take that costs Winds of Magic. And I use this repeatedly all battle long. Regenerating tons and tons of Winds of Magic. And just healing as many units as I can. Shield of the Old Ones for that damage resistance and leadership bonus. You'll see me use that quite a bit in some of the blobbed up fights that we have. Banishment and the Ruination of Cities. 2 AoE type spells that are bound to him. You see I only have 2 uses and they have 120-second cooldown. I have 2 uses of each. But I'm going to get huge, enormous value from that this game. And hopefully I can get all of those on camera every time I do use those. And the Pegasus Knights here have had enough. They're backing up. I've got my Stegadons and my Bastiladons targeting them. And they were starting to take some pretty serious damage over there. So, okay. So my Empire ally here. Frontline, pretty cheap units. I see some Spearmen, Swordsmen, Spearmen with shields. Sigmar's Sons here, the Regiment of Renown. They are unbreakable. Good unit to hold the center line. Swordsmen and more Spearmen. So just lots of cheap infantry to try and tie up the enemy while the big heavy hitters do all the damage. The Tattersouls here, another choice that I like. An unbreakable unit. Kind of a tar pit unit that can deal the damage with that frenzy ability. We have some handgunners up on the high ground here. And are there 2 groups? Yes, 2 groups of handgunners here. They're going to be very good at trying to deal with heavily armored Bretonnian cav. And just to kind of anchor the line here, an Empire Captain on foot. I don't hate this choice at all either. Just using that encouragement aura to keep the cheap units fighting. That's not a bad strategy. And then the Great Swords, the very expensive infantry here for the Empire. You'll see them running with their Great Swords. They're going to be kind of falling back and getting out of the front lines. I like that choice. Sometimes it's better just engage initially with your cheap units. Let everyone get kind of beaten up and then throw in your Great Swords. Commit them to the fight after the fact. And you'll be able to generate lots of value with them that way. We also have 2 casters. It's a pretty unique thing. We have a Bright Wizard as well as a Light Wizard. The Light Wizard has Net of Amnatok as well as, I think that's Time Warp. Or no, that's Foz Protection. Okay, 30 armor and melee defense. Pretty cheap spells, but also very versatile. The net can be used to tie down units to force them to take damage from artillery. And now, let's go ahead and might as well get into this. We have the Sunmaker. In 2v2s, this is an amazingly powerful unit. Huge missile range and missile damage. They do fire damage as well. but in blobbed up formations like this, he's basically single-handedly forcing them to come to us. We have lots and lots of range. The stegadons have a surprising amount of range as well, and you'll see I'm still shooting at the Royal Pegasus Knights, hoping to take them out. They're an extremely valuable unit. But the Sunmaker is just firing away into these huge formations and trying to get kills. Let's see if they get any. Yeah, those men-at-arms, polearms are getting decimated. The Dark Shards are getting smashed. So yeah, the Sunmaker is a pretty powerful unit. Only 6 kills at the moment, but that'll quickly change. It's like the fastest firing artillery unit in the game. And then the Bright Wizard kind of started to go over him but didn't finish. He only has Burning Head. I think that's what that's called. Yeah, the Burning Head. Okay, so it's very similar to a Wind of Death style spell. Let's say he were to cast it here, it would go straight down the line and burn all these units, for those of you who aren't familiar. And then to back them up, some Demigryph Knights with Halberds. Very good at, kind of countering Bretonnian skirmishers. They're pretty fast, but they'll deal nicely with cavalry, heavily armored, and large targets. That's what they're meant to fight. And then, of course, we do have the Steam Tank. Another very cool choice. I was happy that my ally decided to go with some unique units here. 160 armor. I think that's tied for the most in the game. I think the Ragnarok Queen and the Rotting Leviathans also have 160 armor. But they are, of course, unbreakable. They cause terror. They have their cannon, which acts as a standard artillery piece with 380 range. But they also have a bit of like a turret on the top that kind of spins around. You see it here, and it shoots steam off in all different directions, and they'll get a lot of kills from that as well. So is that it for us? No, of course, we need to talk about Karl Franz. He took almost all of his abilities. That's interesting. I see Blood Roar, which lowers, let's see if we can click on him. Come on, Karl. There we go. Lowers leadership around, anyone who fights around Karl Franz will have that leadership reduction. Hold the line for encouragement. Foe Seeker to make him fast and give him some vigor. Stand your ground. Reikland Runefang, there we go. Plus 8 leadership and plus 26 melee attack. If you pop that at the same time that you also pop Gal Maraz, his hammer, you get plus 16 bonus versus large and plus 40% armor piercing. So his weapon strength, armor piercing, values, and melee attack go through the roof. And then whatever he's attacking pretty much melts if you use all of those types of buffs at the same time. And he's a very mobile threat up on Deathclaw. Alright, all of that's out of the way. Let's go ahead and get into our opponent's armies before this gets way, way, way too crazy, because it's going to get crazy pretty soon. You'll see here, first off, we talked about the Dark Shards. I use that Plaque of Dominion. We're going to be driving them off the battlefield very shortly. The other one is thinking about engaging. I think at this point I am drawing arrows to my ally, hoping that he sees these units. I don't really have any assets here that are quick enough to tie them down, but I was hoping he would send some units this way, and I thought that's what he was doing when he was moving his formation, but it turns out he was just kind of getting some of his units out of the front line. I really wish, since they had deployed over here, that he would have brought some of these units to my flank, because at the moment I'm going to be holding this entire army back with 3 units of skinks and some temple guard. And I mean, this is his artillery piece, you got to protect it. And he's got some assets here, some spearmen, but it's nothing compared to an entire army. So another unit that's kind of out on the wings here is going to be some of this Bretonnian cavalry. Let's go ahead and slow-mo it a little bit so you can watch them move. But we have Knights of the Realm, good anti-large units. Questing Knights, these are the armor piercers that are very good at dealing with melee. You'll see they're holding great swords. The Companions of Quoneus, these are going to be an absolute terror on the battlefield for this battle. They're basically just Questing Knights on steroids, and they have a static physical resistance of 20%, immune to psychology, and they, for whatever reason, have fire resistance, which is kind of cool, I guess. Knights of the Lionhearted, these are the Knights of the Realm Regiment of Renown. They deal magic damage, as well as having an encouragement aura and causing fear. Pretty unique. They just kind of have a lot of unique stats, and with their, status as a Regiment of Renown comes being rank 9, and their stats are just going to be very, very juiced. And also just a kind of a random unit of Grail Guardians here. So Grail Knights, but with a focus on fighting infantry. They have their physical resistance, they have perfect vigor, they do not get tired in combat, and holding them in reserve until the last moment can be absolutely brutal for an opponent, because then you still have to wear down a unit that just never gets tired. Giving them lots of healing will help them sustain through long battles. And now we have the Cold One Knights for the Dark Elves. These are the anti-large version. You'll notice the difference. They basically have spears or lances, and you can kind of tell at a glance that these are the ones that are designed to deal with cavalry or large targets, like my dinosaurs, to be fair. I thought he had 2 units of those. Did I miss one? Looks like maybe there was only one. Maybe they moved. But I'm still trying to kite out these Pegasus Knights. I'm trying to kite them into the range of my Bastiladons, into my Stegadons, so that we can do a lot of fire, you know, to them. And the Stegadons here are hyper accurate. You'll see the ballistas are nailing these Pegasus. And there's 2 of them. They go down right there. Those were actually Royal Pegasus Knights, so pretty good value there. And these units are going to just have such a hard time getting away from all this cavalry and all this flying cavalry. We went over them already, so we don't need to belabor that anymore. But the front line for the Bretonnians, some peasant mobs here, just to take those shots. Thankfully, my ally is not using the Sunmaker on them. He's using them on the more high-value targets in the center of the blob. He's got some men-at-arms, standard men-at-arms with pole arms here for anti-large. It's a good choice. Lots of shields, though, for that extra melee defense, and of course, resistance to missile damage. And yeah, good choice. And then Alberic de Bordelot, the Lord of the Riverlands himself, on foot. Very interesting choice. He has some of his abilities. It looks like Heroic Killing Blow. Yes, as well as Rally. So just to give him some extra damage. And the Spirit of the Tempest affects allies in range, gives them charge bonus and speed. Cool ability, but I mean, I would definitely want to put that on him when he was mounted and use that in conjunction with knights to increase their charge bonus. I think that's really where that type of ability shines. And he also has a Grail Relique to give that that leadership aura all around him. It's a pretty goofy unit. For those of you who've never seen it before, it's a bunch of peasants carrying a dead Grail Knight. And it gives this buff here, so leadership, immunity, psychology, and it's a pretty poor combatant, but it does have 20% physical resistance as well as frenzy. It'll get a few kills over the course of a long battle, but it's mostly just kind of a tank. And yeah, that's its main purpose. So for the front line, for the Dark Elves, some cheap infantry here in the form of Dread Spears, not a bad choice, but they're mixed in with the Sisters of Slaughter, so these gladiatorial women of the Dark Elves, with their poison damage, their enormous stats, no armor to speak of, but they do have plus 20% physical resistance, and pretty huge melee defense, 61 melee defense, and they're going to tear up my poor skinks if they're allowed to engage with them. Lots of Dark Shards. I see 2 units of Dark Shards. That's enough to melt just about anything if they focus fire, but there's also the Dark Riders here with repeater crossbows. I think I saw 2 of those. Yeah, 1 on each flank. They're going to bring that mobile armor-piercing component to this army. A single Reaper Bolt Thrower here is going to get a lot of value over the course of a long game if it's not dealt with. And yeah, so there were 2 units of Cold One Knights. One of them ended up kind of cresting the hill. And then, let's see, the last unit perhaps. Yeah, let's pause it, because this is, I mean, look how epic this is in the background. There are, I think, 3 more important things that we need to talk about. So, actually, even more than that. Here are the Black Guard of Nagaron. A nice inclusion. Anytime you're fighting the Lizardmen, I would consider bringing them as something that can stand and fight with pretty much all Lizardmen infantry, but also against any Dino unit. They are going to be absolute units. They're going to be able to take them down. Heavy armor piercing, anti-large, charge defense against large. They're also one of the aesthetically coolest units that the Dark Elves can bring. I also missed the Beast Layers of Bastion. Kind of similar in that regard. They're like foot squires, but made to fight large targets. And they're going to be useful in this battle as well. Kind of an auto-include once again, anytime you're going to be fighting the Lizardmen. So here we have a Death Hag. Let's see what abilities our opponent decided to bring on the Death Hag. We can check them out. God, I can't stand this. I don't understand why you can't just click on a unit in a replay. It's not always this hard, but when the units get mixed in and amongst each other, it's pretty difficult. So Chillblade here, -5 melee attack and -12% speed and an aura around her. She also has Frenzy and Murderous Mastery, so she gets tons of buffs whenever the Murderous Mastery procs. Whenever enough units have died, that'll proc for this battle. She also, of course, causes Encourage and has a physical resistance of 20, because like the Sisters of Slaughter, she does not have any armor, but what she does have is huge melee attack with poison. So very good assassin type unit. Also, we have the Charybdis. So man, don't underestimate this unit. It doesn't have the same type of regen as a standard Hydra, but what it does have is enormous capability in terms of dueling any type of large monstrous unit. It's made to kill large targets, and it does poison damage as well to lower their stats while they're dueling, and it will absolutely wreck them. It has an ability, a passive, Abyssal Howl, so -8 leadership and an AoE around it, which combos very well with some of the abilities that Morathi has. And Morathi's the last thing we're going to go over, I promise, and then we're going to get to the action. So Morathi, oh god, it took so many spells and abilities. She has a ton of abilities. She has it's map wide. Spiteful Conjuration, so whenever she's casting, your entire enemy army, which is amazing for 2v2s, gets -15 armor. That's so huge. Of course, Greater Arcane Conduit, she's a Supreme Caster Lord. Enchanting Beauty and an AoE, -9 melee attack. Charge bonus not very important, but the -9 melee attack and an AoE in conjunction with Heartrender and the Dark Sword, -9 melee attack and melee defense. These things absolutely crush any type of frontline blob fight. You just park her right on top, and then your side just wins, because the other units are going to be so thoroughly neutered. Especially if she's casting spells, lowering armor. There's just so much that she can do. And then if she drops a Soul Blight with that as well, she's lowering the armor by another 30, so you're getting -45 armor with -25% damage. It's all huge. Power of Darkness here for even more. She causes damage to self. So this is a way for her to regenerate her Winds of Magic, for those of you who aren't familiar. Soul Stealer does an AoE type damage, and it heals her, as well as Heroic Killing Blow, and then the last thing is going to be the Wand of Caradon, which only has 2 uses, but it does some pretty severe magic damage if it strikes its target. And for those of you who've never seen what Morathi looks like, she's got big hair, and she's pretty frightening. Alright, so without any further ado, guys, let's get into it. Are you ready? I'm ready. The Reaper Claw Bolt Thrower is starting to counter skirmish out the Sunmaker, who's already up to 71 kills. My poor skinks have been engaged on. My Pterodon Riders are trying to get out of there. One of them has been, I think, completely wasted. Yeah, I think so. They're just that little bit too slow, and I wasn't able to spread out all the fire. Once the Knights came in, the Questing Knights and the Companions of Cloneus, I was not able to micro away from all of those different units. It was just kind of impossible. Now my skinks are throwing in their javelins. Doesn't do bad versus the Sisters of Slaughter, but once they actually get into melee, they slide in and use their whips. Yeah, it's going to be pretty brutal. They're going to be able to take them down, no problem. Mixed in amongst Dread Spears is going to be a nice cushion for them to take that damage. And now I've realized, you know what? This flank is so weak. My ally is not really supporting me over here. He's just leaving his infantry corps on this side of the battlefield, and I'm not sure why. But I was forced to bring forward my Temple Guard. I was going to try and stop up this Charybdis, but I think I ended up going on the Death Hag probably by accident. And I needed to bring my Feral Cold Ones here, trying to get in amongst the back line with my Sora Scarvet to try and deny this flank for the moment. But I'm going to end up sending them in the backfield and getting them into that fight. Using Shield of the Old Ones and a Banishment in conjunction with the Ruination of Cities on this blobbed up group here. And we're going to get a ton of kills on Mazdamundi. The Charybdis is into the back lines, trying to pull Lord Mazdamundi out, but he is poisoned from dueling with that Charybdis. And this is something I was trying desperately to get my ally to see, is that he was shooting Mazdamundi in the face. And he does it quite a few times and completely kind of whiffs on his targets. But I realize, hey, the battle is over here, and I'm bringing all of my skink units to bear in this fight. My Stegadons are still online, my Bastiladons are still online, still shooting. These, unfortunately, have been tied down by the Cold One Knights. Out on the flanks here, Knights of the Lionhearted. Some of the cavalry units are being used to push other units off the battlefield, but Karl Franz here, using Net of Amnitok to tie down Morathi, is going to be beating away on her. Probably had all of his abilities procced right in the beginning, which is why he got such huge damage. But you have to finish her off, and I don't know if he will. I feel like she may end up coming back to this battle. Steam Tank parked here, being used completely as an artillery piece for now. That's not a bad choice, but I'm being heavily overrun. The Empire is now coming to my aid. Empire Captain fighting in the front line, driving off all of these men-at-arms. Sigmar's sons beating them back. Cold One Knights in and amongst the infantry. That's not where they want to be. These are the anti-large variant. They're going to have a hard time. And Dark Charge as well, kind of caught up in the melee. And this is a pretty big juicy blob. Let's see if I can get any more spells going off. Charybdis is still alive and absolutely destroying my Bastiladon with the solar engine. The steam tank is being moved to this flank. Not the best choice. You don't want it fighting Knights of the Realm, but if it's holding back, 3 groups of cavalry all by itself, that's probably not a bad choice. Shield of the Old One's going down in this enormous fight, giving 22% damage resistance and leadership to all of these units, which is absolutely huge. And Lord Mazdamundi is just in here, fighting Sisters of Slaughter. Alberic de Bordeleau is also going to feel some of the wrath, and there's another ruination of cities going on, putting Lord Mazdamundi up to 321 kills. Absolutely brutal. And at this point, he has no fear. I've got my Saurus Scarvet dueling Alberic de Bordeleau. A burning head going off from my Empire ally. Bit of a whiff there. It might have caught, the beginnings of this formation, but it's a pretty wild ability. And it's actually going to be roasting some of my Temple Guard, but it looks like it probably did more damage to him than to me. And a banishment here going off on this cavalry, not the best use, but it was just enough damage to break them off. And trying to free up my Bastiladons pretty desperately. My stegadons, I've been able to keep them kind of high and tight in this formation and continue shooting. And they've been shooting at pretty high value targets this entire battle. Some of my skinks have been beaten up and routed, but I've been bringing them back constantly. The chameleon skinks are coming back here, trying to pull them back to the front line or using them to keep units like these questing knights out of our back line. The handgunners, getting that bit of cover from the skinks, they're going to be able to absolutely tear apart the questing knights who don't have any type of physical resistance or resistance whatsoever to missile damage. So my ally did not chase off Morathi. She was able to come back and cast her spells. Pretty big mistake, but I'm turning my Bastiladons onto her because right now she is completely debuffing our entire army. All of this front line is being smashed by her debuffs, and that's allowing these very cheap infantry units to get a lot of value. Two paladins here on Pegasus. Very mobile, threatening force here. And I realized at this moment, I was like, oh god, Mazdamundi is so vulnerable to them. They're anti-large specialists, and if they try and focus him down, I'm going to be in trouble. So I ran him forward to kind of mix him better with my units to prevent that. But what ended up happening is at kind of the exact same time, the Dark Elf player pulled back his Dark Shards from the front line where he had them stuck, and he's starting to focus down Lord Mazdamundi. So Mazdamundi has that huge missile resistance of 27%, but it's not going to be enough versus the armor piercing. That armor piercing is just too brutal. Even with 140 armor, it's not going to be enough to save him. And I'm going to end up taking a lot of damage. I pop my heal Apotheosis to save him, and I managed to do that. Going in against the Charybdis also probably not very bright. In just a moment here, I'm going to be like, oh crap, and I'm going to try and pull him away. There goes the Apotheosis, overcast. Still some Pegasus Knights in the battlefield. The back line is just kind of me using skinks to hopefully try and save these units. These handgunners are a bit forgotten about. These Demigryph Knights as well could have been committed against the Charybdis here, but have just been sort of sitting. And it's just me throwing in my skinks time after time and trying to get them to hold this front line and help out our Empire ally. The Stegadon now, it's taking some hits to its leadership because Mazdamundi is running off the battlefield, and while he's running, he can't heal, and he's going to have a hard time. Smart play from the Bretonnian player. I think he's trying to use his Pegasus to chase off Mazdamundi and to finish him off, which is not going to be too hard to do. Rally, heroic killing blow going off here from Alberic de Bordeleau, who's still alive despite dueling my Saurus Scarvet. And he's in the front lines just murdering Tattersouls. Yeah, down go the Empire's faithful. Pegasus Knights are still in the battlefield. It's so rough. One Bastiladon here still firing. The steam tank and the Demigryph Knights are now getting into the Charybdis, taking it down with the help of the handgunners who are up on this hill. So them being in reserve is paying off for the moment because they're so healthy that this Charybdis is just not going to have a chance against these Demigryph Knights. Yeah, cannonballs bouncing off of its hide. That's pretty awesome. But these Pegasus Knights, they're anti-large specialists, and they're going to be getting into my Bastiladon. They're very beat up, but the Bastiladon is just not made to fight large targets. Very good against infantry, but not against Pegasus Knights and Knights of the Realm. So it's at this moment that I realize, you know what, my Stegadons, they're out of ammunition. They need to get committed into melee. So Dark Riders are no match for them, and the Death Hag as well. The Stegadon is just an absolute beast. And with their huge mass, they can push through formations pretty easily. The Beast Slayers of Bastion are also getting onto my Bastiladon. So lots of anti-large in this one little area. that we're trying desperately to deal with Morathi is still on the battlefield, guys. Net of Amnatok tying her down. Hopefully these handgunners are opening fire on her. But she should have been dead like minutes ago. Should have been off the battlefield. She was able to get so much value that she should never have gotten. But good play from my ally here. I mean, he's been consistently using the Net of Amnatok. It's just one of those things that had he chased her off the battlefield, you know, those resources could have been spent elsewhere. But surprisingly, his infantry is very healthy, and the Sigmar Sons and the Tattersouls, these two unbreakable units. Is that the last Tattersoul? Yeah, we just watched the last Tattersoul die. These unbreakable units are holding up this entire blob from our opponents, and that's buying us time. It's buying us time to consolidate our forces, to rally around my monstrous units and the heroic units that are left for the Empire. And I'm using my Stegadon here to beat the heck out of Alberic de Bordelot, who on foot is just getting tossed around by that Stegadon. Straight up Jurassic Park style. My Bastiladons here are firing into more of the Pegasus Knights, so I'm still trying to take these guys out, but they're being an absolute nuisance in the background here. I had some Skinks. They're continuously routing and rallying. I'm using them to try and just keep the Companions of Cloneus busy. I'll probably bring them forward in just a second. Yeah, here we go. Just one after the other, as they break, I'm bringing them back. We do not want these Companions to get back into the melee fight. There's still 40 of them left. And a unit like that is very powerful. In the back line here against us, with that armor-piercing damage, they could end up doing quite a bit. So there's still a decent amount of leadership on the other side of the battlefield in the form of these two Paladins and the Grail Reliquae, keeping them fighting, keeping them in high leadership. But the quality of their infantry is just not there anymore. The Reaper Claw Bolt Thrower, or just the Reaper Bolt Thrower, I should say, they got a lot of value this battle. 129 kills. So much value that now the artillery crew is being committed into melee, and my Bastiladon is not happy. Smashing them with his tail and breaking them off the battlefield. Still, quite a few greatswords. They're beat up, but their numbers are still there. Not much ammunition left on the other side for these Dark Shards. These Dark Shards with repeater crossbows. Got 80 kills on those. That's amazing. Good value there. But once they run out of ammo, it's just going to be a straight up fisticuffs fight. You're going to have to get into melee with us and see what you can do. Spearmen with shields, swordsmen, lots of chaff units ready to take the hits for the great swords, letting them do their good armor piercing value. And they're going to take the last few volleys from the Dark Shards, kind of on the chin. And I'm tucking in my Stegadon here behind all these spears. With what, skinks I have left, I still have 56 of these bad boys. And it's at this point that I started arrowing like, hey guys, we need to go in. Let's go into melee. Let's push them now. They're not very well grouped. They have their units, together, but they're not grouped up. We should also be bringing these units forward, especially the handgunners. We really need them now. And the Companions are still busy chasing off my Skinks, so they're not going to be a part of this fight for quite some time, which was 100% intentional. I don't have much left. I have a Bastiladon with maybe 1 or 2 shots. Yeah, 2 shots left. A Stegadon with no shots there. And I'm using my Skinks to kind of help him out in melee. But he's fighting targets he really doesn't want to fight. The Beast Slayer is the Bastion. These Pegasus Knights are trying to get some value by sniping it out. But it's such a tanky target that they almost might have been better served trying to take out something else. Just having the Skinks here was super helpful, and we're able to drive off the Beast Slayers. It never hurts to forget that the Stegadon causes terror, and that in these later stages of the game, terror is a pretty big deal. The Grail Reliquae, though, actually the Grail Reliquae provides immunity psychology, so they shouldn't have broken from terror. They broke just from being beaten up. Yeah, Grail Relic is a pretty good unit to have in this late game type of scenario. But here comes the Companions, and I'm going to get a beautiful shot with one of my remaining. I think that killed 5 units in 1 shot. Look at them. Check that out. But they're in the cookie jar now, and they're going to be tearing up these handgunners. They could probably kill the rest of these handgunners, kill these spearmen, and then put a dent in the steam tank. It's pretty much how strong those units are. And everything being committed from our opponents here. Only 1 shot left from my solar engine. The Great Swords are still fighting. The Stegadon is still up. And the Pegasus Knights, as strong as they are, as strong as these Paladins are, they're surrounded by spears. And that's just a perfect counter for us. And the Stegadon is going to just bully them around. And that's going to be it. The steam tank stayed firing the entire battle. Not really being committed too much into melee, except for that one time to hold that flank. But good play from my ally. Let's go ahead and check out the unit breakdown. See where all the kills were. Yeah, this is where the kills were. If you were wondering how we managed to turn that infantry fight around, 440 kills on Mazdamundi. Not to mention all the healing he did and the damage mitigation with the Shield of the Old Ones plus 22%. Not to mention, you know, how much he absolutely tanked with 10,000 HP with 140 armor plus, you know, all the healing he did to himself for that entire battle. He was tanking quite a bit. The Temple Guard were able to hold that one corner for as long as we needed them to, and just decent value from the Skinks. They fought until the end. Chameleon Skinks weren't able to get their full value, but they kited the Pegasus Knights into oblivion for a huge chunk of that game. Pharaoh Cold Ones held their flank for a while. The Pterodon Riders, you know, honestly didn't expect any sort of flying presence from Bretonnia. I was pretty shocked by that, and I wasn't able to use them in the way that I had intended. But the stegadons here, not the ancient stegadons, just the standard variant, amazing artillery pieces in the early game to focus down high value targets, and then in the late game they're just giant terror causing monsters, and they were able to get lots and lots of value. So Cottonmouth Gamer, let's see, Karl Franz, not a lot of kills, but that's because he was focused on sniping out units, and he went down. I think he was being focused by the Reaper Claw, by the Reaper Bolt Thrower at some point. But yeah, man, it was just, I wish he had chased off Morathi early in the game, because I think he ended up taking a lot of the Morathi's bound spells to the face later on. Spearmen held. Swordsman did well. Cheap units at Tattersouls, one of my favorite units on the Empire roster. As an unbreakable unit that does a ton of damage. You throw them up against something like, you know, Dread Spears and Sisters of Slaughter, units like that with low armor, and they'll stand and fight to the last man and get you tons and tons of value. The Sunmaker, surprisingly low number of kills for how blobbed up the enemies were. They might have gotten knocked off before they were able to shoot their full payload. The Reaper Bolt Thrower was pretty on point with that spread fire, knocking them down. And then the Steam Tank was very healthy near the end, and one unit of Demigryph Knights was able to help us, you know, peel that Charybdis off of my dinos in that later stage of the game, and they were a pretty good counter with some help from the handgunners. So the Dark Elf player, Morathi, good on him. You know, he didn't see his Morathi like falling to Karl Franz and then just give up. He continuously brought her back and made sure that he was using all of his Winds of Magic, as she was probably the best resource he had this battle. And despite, you know, 84 kills is a lot of kills, but despite only having 84 kills, her debuffs in the frontline battles were hugely appreciated, I'm sure, on their side of the battlefield. Yeah, Charybdis was able to bully my dinos. The Cold One Knights were kind of thrown into the front line, but I don't really blame them. There really weren't that many great large targets. I didn't have a lot of cavalry. The Empire didn't have a lot of cavalry, so using them just to try and push through that front line might have been a decent strat. And then the Dark Shards being able to focus fire down Mazdamundi and just get lots and lots of kills. I mean, they generated tons of value, probably mostly on Skinks, but honestly, that's what the Skinks are there for, sadly. And then Alberic de Bordelot. Yeah, the Questing Knights. 296 kills. While they were busy killing Questing Knights, we were busy trying to win the game, and we were able to do that. I'm so glad they weren't there for that final battle. And yeah, good army selection. That's something I want to say about everyone on the field today, is that they had great army selection. This army is very focused on being able to deal with large dinos, Knights of the Realms, Men-at-Arms with polearms, the Beast Slayers here, and the Pegasus Knights. All great at dealing with large targets, but this is also an army that is pretty decent at dealing with the Empire as well. Taking these shields will protect you from any type of crossbow or handgunner fire. The peasant mobs oftentimes take the brunt of artillery fire, the opening salvos of the game, and yeah, even the Grail Guardians is a pretty good last stand type unit. Didn't see how they ended up falling. Only 28 kills is surprising. They must have gotten into some units they didn't have a favorable matchup with. But yeah, that's the tale of the tape. Alright guys, whew, I feel like I'm going to lose my voice after that one. That was a pretty long battle and an intense one. But I have another good one lined up. Like I said, we played multiple battles, and the next one, I don't know. It was a pretty intense day of battling, and hopefully y'all enjoyed this one. I feel like my brain is a bit fried after casting all that. But yeah, hope you enjoyed today's video. Once again, my name is Brett. My channel is Good Talk Gaming. Big shout out and thanks to my ally and my opponents here, Cottonmouth Gamer, Macabre737, and Menace100 for being good sports and excellent players and giving me a good match. So guys, without any further ado, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.